Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Sinner. So a lot of interesting things went down in this episode. First of all, let's kind of talk about Mason's side of the story. We see Mason kind of obviously dealing with the ramifications of him attacking JD last episode. I did appreciate the fact is that he tried to spit it and make it seem like JD started it, even though he was the one. Yes, JD was kind of acting like an asshole and kind of like being smug about it and everything. Like he knows more than he's letting on, but he was saying stuff because he knew it would get Mason, because Mason's walking up there pretending like he knows everything when in fact he knows nothing at all. But what's interesting is the steps he takes throughout the episode. First, he's getting he tracks down JD to like his place. When JD leaves, he ends up talking to JD's girlfriend and basically buying drugs off of her, pretending to be one of his friends. She gets in contact with JD. It's like, oh wait, who is this guy? Who are you? Get the hell out of my place. So I mean, granted, they know his face now, and probably when JD comes back, I'm sure he'll have to either explain it or his girlfriend will kind of figure out by herself, like, oh, now I understand what this is all about. What kind of connection do you have all to this? Why would this guy come to our place and everything? I'm sure those questions might come up. We'll really have to see, or whether, I don't know, it depends on the girlfriend, whether she does anything herself or whether JD tells the truth or not. I mean, I don't know. It seems like whatever that whole situation, whatever it is with Korra, which obviously I'll dive into later on, it seems like it might be something that he's just trying to avoiding himself. It just, I don't know, because you see the look on his face like, oh, what did Korra tell you? Makes you think like there's some aspects of that he doesn't like. It's not, I just once again, it seems like it's counter to like the assholeness that he kind of shows when he doesn't want to answer stuff. I don't know. But Mason did all that to buy drugs, even recorded the girlfriend, and ends up bringing Caitlyn in on it. But Caitlyn's like, no, are you stupid? You're doing this. It's going to either get you killed and as well as get me fired, so drop it. So, and she ended up bringing up something interesting, too, about Mason, too. She brought up the fact is that, like, she's like, Dad, this is just like you, always using people. It's like, what are you telling? It's like, I never used you. She's like, yeah, you had sex with me and you would never look at me again. So I think she had brought that up, like, wasn't it like the first episode, like, when it got brought up, first or second episode, about how she knew Mason. It was like, yeah, Mason was kind of an asshole in high school. Like, the way they talked and everything, the way she talked to him and everything, made it seem like, oh, there was some familiarity, like, but they were on good terms. But now it seems like there's kind of an awkward familiarity in the sense of, it wasn't even necessarily dating. It was probably a situation of like he basically has, as she said, kind of had sex with him once, and he just, so it's probably a situation of she liked him, and for whatever reason, like, I don't know, like there's definitely something up with Mason's character in the sense of like he also told Korra not to talk to Harry because she's like, oh yeah, Harry's trying to help me out and everything. He's like, no, he's not. Harry's in this for his own reasons. The cops are just going to like do whatever they can. Like the moment they learn stuff, they're just going to use it against you and screw you over. So it's like, I know these type of things. Like I know this type of thing, which is like, why would you know that? Like he talks like he knows from personal experience, which brings up the question, like, is he saying like from the sense that he used to get in a lot of trouble with cops or something like that? Whether I feel like that's something that's just kind of a little line there that seemed like it might be insignificant. Maybe it is just talking about him as a teenager in a sense of like, yeah, he got in trouble all the time as a kid. Or maybe it's referencing like, oh, he's gotten into some trouble in the past, like some serious trouble, maybe some like, it kind of sticks with you and follows you around trouble. Maybe not. Well, we'll just kind of have to wait and see on that. But it's so interesting seeing the level that, like, as far as Mason would go. Like, the moment he found out about this whole JD thing, he's been going full force with it rather than kind of. And it's kind of interesting, too, the person he keeps turning to, even though he keeps telling Korra not to trust her. I guess not specifically cops, specifically Harry, because Harry's so invested in it. Yet the cop he turns to over and over again is Caitlyn, but then you see that we learned the history that they have too, so that's just kind of interesting to me why he keeps turning to her specifically. Why not trust Harry? But then again, it's like, well, the question still arises, like, what the hell does Harry get out of this? What is his, like, what does he gain from all this? Because that conversation kind of came up earlier, later in the episode when Korra brought it up herself, because she's going through, like, that hypnosis to kind of learn things, and she's like, he wants to sit in on this session, and she's like, no. she's like, until you tell me why. And he kind of dodges around. And he's like, oh yeah, there's a light in the tunnel for this situation. And he's like, I just want to help you get there. And she's like, that's not good enough. And basically talks about the fact is she in her mind was like, oh, I'm in a swamp. And I guess for him, he's like, I know what that's like to be in a swamp. And I guess at the time it's supposed to be taken metaphorically, but then later on it kind of makes it seem like it's more of a literal thing. Like, no, she was literally stuck in a swamp, like with that whole situation, but I'll get to that in a second. So I'm thinking it's like kind of where Harry is in life, and maybe it has been where he has been for a while. So I guess you could arguably say, like, obviously it fits with both his relationship as well as his professional life, which is kind of interesting because it got on Caitlin a little bit, because Caitlin spilled the beans about this whole situation to Mason, that basically things happened, unfolded the way they did with Mason because Caitlin crossed that boundary and should have kept certain pertinent information to herself. So, and that's extra reason why, like, there's that divide of, like, her not wanting to help him and telling him, yo, dude, back down, don't do that, you're gonna be an idiot and get yourself hurt. More, and also along those same lines, wants to get me fired. So, but it's just kind of interesting considering the fact is we see the state like Harry's relationship is in. He's trying things with Faye, but then at the same time, he's kind of having that whole like dominatrix, almost like a fair thing, whatever that whole situation is. I keep referring to her as a dominatrix because that's the closest thing I can really think of to kind of fit like what kind of relationship that is, you know? I mean, I don't know whether it's just a physical thing or whether it's an emotional thing too. It might be like a combination of the two, so. But nevertheless. So what I'm thinking is like kind of that obviously he's in that like mud and he's kind of stuck when it comes to his relationship. Like he cares about Faye, but I think it's just like something's lost there. And I think that same thing is along with his job, that maybe this doesn't have anything to do with the good nature of his heart. That the fact of the matter is when it comes to his job, this is a fascinating case to him. Maybe he has kind of like a Sherlock Holmes type of thing going on where it's like he only likes cases that are really interesting and he's bored of just regular cases. This case is so weird and crazy that there's truth out there and he just wants to find it. Not necessarily for Korra's sake. Maybe it is, but you know, maybe there's some like professionalism in him that's like, no, I just want to solve this great mystery, you know? It seems like that could arguably what that could represent as well, you know? Like I said, I mean, in his case, it seems metaphorical, but in Korra's case, it seems more literal. Because it's interesting too, because this episode also shows that there is kind of a bond growing between them, you know, contrary to the fact is that Mason was like, don't get close to him. So ultimately the question is, will it backfire? It does seem like he is legitimately trying to help Korra. Like I said, metaphorically speaking, that seems like where that could represent the fact is that this is just some mystery, that he's tired of just the mundane, that he took this case and he's trying so hard because he wants to know the truth, that the fact of the matter is Korra's particular situation doesn't matter to him. It's just a case itself. But it does seem like he has taken an interest in her, because there's moments where it's like even Korra called him and was like, you know, it's like every time like you giving me looks like what I'm saying isn't enough for you, you know? So that's what I don't know. We'll kind of have to wait and see, but that's immediately where my brain goes. So it's at the same time, it is kind of hard to say, like, if I do believe that, it's kind of hard to believe that he actually cares about Korra, but it does seem like he does, because even she asks, like, are you like this with everyone else or just me? Is it just because of the case? Is it because of Korra? Like, what in particular drives him to do this case? I'd love to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that going forward. Hopefully, I think we'll get the answer to that. So, like I said, this, you know, that's just my thoughts on that. Like that being presented the way it was made me think that I could be 100% wrong in thinking that, and he legitimately just cares for Korra for whatever reason. I mean, we did learn about. Kind of going head into it about Harry in this episode that was kind of interesting. Is for one, there's a whole situation between him and his wife. There's this like place he took her. It's kind of a restaurant. And basically, she made him remember like the significance. She made him remember the significance of the place because he had forgotten. And it was like the first place he took her to after they discovered their situation with their baby, which I would assume, like, considering the kind of like look on her face and just how hard it is to talk about, it seems like it was like they lost a child situation. And he was like, hey, we'll sit here, eat this lobster and stuff. And it's like, you can take as long as you need to. Just tell me when you're ready and we can try again. But the fact is, I mean, at least that we know if they don't have any kids, or at the very least it doesn't seem like they do, maybe. So it's kind of a situation of like, maybe they never tried again, you know, maybe kind of along the same lines. And maybe that mud popped up and he just, I don't know. And the fact is he actually feels bad about it because he doesn't remember it. So which kind of plays into something later on in the episode too, like at the end, like when they're like when him and Faye are on that hike, that are having this conversation, or at least she's having the one about like, oh, maybe we should kind of have a difference in life. Maybe it's like we should keep our separate lives. At the same time, like, eventually, like, it's like keep our lives separate in the sense of keep stuff just for us, but then obviously have moments where we have stuff together too. Like we need to be independent yet also working as a team. That, like, that aspect of a strong relationship essentially. And he's just kind of like, yeah, sure, you're right. And it's kind of interesting. I'm like, oh, so it's like they never really went over it, but it's like it was probably a situation of him just being like, oh yeah, we should go for a hike. Oh really? Yeah, I know this great spot. And this great spot ends up being connected to the case, the whole like location that Korra's pulling from, like her hypnosis and everything. So it seems like a situation of like, it didn't seem like his wife knew. It's a situation of like he went there before. We saw it a little bit at one point in the episode, so it seems like she didn't know. So I'm curious to see how she feels after this. She's like, oh wait, you brought me here because this was related to a case. Because for her, she always felt invisible, and now you see that even more. Like where it's like, oh, a plant or something else or a case is kind of making her kind of take a back seat. That the fact of the matter is, it's like, oh, you had this sweet place planned out for us to take a stroll. Oh, it's for a case. You just brought me along to kind of shut me up and made it seem like I was, maybe she was asking him like, oh, we should spend more time together and take this time to talk and stuff like that. It's like, oh, why don't we talk and walk, and just kind of like two birds one stone type of situation. So, but something I was going to bring up earlier about I let my mind is the fact is that they were going to have, I assume, a little girl, and now I'm sitting here thinking about it because I think Harry had said the name Mel, so now I'm like, oh, so maybe that's what this is all about for him too, like arguably the more emotional side of things, kind of going back to the whole like, oh, keep your emotions out of like professionalism and stuff like that. And now you have him, if it turns out to be a case, maybe that's why he takes such an interest in Korra, because it's like if he had a daughter, his daughter would be, if their child had lived, whatever the circumstances may have been, that child would have grown up to be about Korra's age. So maybe that's another reason why, like, when he looks at her, he sees potentially the life his child could have led in some shape or form. Maybe he's projecting a little. I don't know. Once again, just kind of another random thought of like where that could be. Just me making my own observations and interpretations. But kind of really diving into this episode, I mean, I'm kind of skipped over like the biggest part of it, and that is big parts in Korra's memories, kind of reliving a lot of stuff. We ended up kind of reflecting a little bit on her when she was younger. Ended up learning, like, once again, you kind of see like the family dynamic not being continued to be weird, because I would assume you had them being Phoebe and Korra being very curious, but at the same time, it's just like, I don't know, they have very interesting observations and conversations, like stuff that they were watching in the episode. You're like, are you watching what I think you're watching? Wow, that's okay. Wow, okay, that's something. Also talking about this neighbor they have, I think his name is Keith. And then it's like, oh yeah, he has a girlfriend, but his girlfriend's cheating on him. And they, at the same time, they also, like, this is where Korra finds out about her dad cheating on their mom. And it turns out Phoebe knew, but she didn't know how to tell Korra. And there's even a point where Korra is trying to tell her dad, like, hey, don't go over there. Just, stay here, stay home. And he's like, it's okay, honey. Like, no need to be worried or something. And goes over there. So, which her mom and dad are still together. So, I don't know, like, it might be one of the situations, like I said, like, it seems like the mom is a little out there, and it seems like it's not just the kids that notice it. It seems like even the dad has his breaking point, to the point he's off having an affair. So it might be a situation where she's like, yeah, she might have found out about it, whether or not it's from Korra or Phoebe, or whether she just caught her husband herself. Maybe it's a situation where she's like, well, because she's a religious person, she doesn't believe in divorce, so she's like, yeah, I guess we're just stuck together. I'm just stuck together with this piece of crap. Maybe she doesn't even care, because she's just like, there's no love here or anything like that. The only love, because it seems like the only person she really cares about is Phoebe. No one else, everyone else kind of takes a back seat to that. There's no equal love distributed amongst that family. At least that's how I see it. I mean, that's honestly how they've kind of portrayed it so far. But along with all of that, like, you had Korra reliving memories about JD, We kind of learn who the blonde lady is from all the dreams and stuff of Cora's, and it turns out that lady, her name is Maddie. She's actually JD's ex-girlfriend, which there's problems between Maddie and Korra because they don't like each other. I guess it's a sense of like Maddie doesn't like Korra because she thinks Maddie's going to take Korra away from her, and then maybe there's another level of like Korra not liking her because she's keeping me down or something like that. I guess it's like with Maddie around, she can never really fully spread her wings. Maybe she kind of wants to be a little bit more intimate with JD, but she can't because it's like they have their whole arrangement, but it's like she kind of has to be involved in everything, so it's like she can't go as far as she wants to. And then at the same time, you had the whole situation with a lady that was going to bring up charges against them for stuff, because obviously like JD's kind of mixed up in drugs and everything like that, because we see that with his current girlfriend selling drugs. And at the same time, it's like there was kind of a open relationship type of thing with this lady, with Maddie and this lady. And there was a point she thought JD stole some stuff from her, and then that turned into like Maddie freaking out. And at the same time, or roughly around that time, is when Maddie disappeared. But it's not like she just left. It's like a lot of her stuff was still there. So it's like that's why the lady was kind of like, oh my god, like when she found out it was a murder case investigation, she's like, oh, he murdered her, didn't he? So where my brain immediately goes to, because we cut back and forth with Korra's memories and then being in that mud, and it's not just her this time, it's Maddie too. It's like they're being hunted. So, the person with the flashlight and saying that they're being hunted, and the person with the mask that we kind of saw last episode, she kind of dived deeper into that this episode. So, where my brain is immediately is they did something. When it came to JD, they did something. They pissed him off, whatever the case may be. And he left him somewhere. He left him stranded somewhere just to kind of teach them a lesson or something. Maybe it's some twisted game he was playing. And at that moment he did that to them, he went off somewhere on it, and he's like, oh, I'm going to circle back and get them. Or maybe he had no intentions of ever getting them, whatever the case may be. And someone else came and found him, and that's the dude in the mask. And that guy did whatever he did to them. I mean, there's a body found at the end of the episode. Can only assume it's Maddie's. But maybe that's it. Because we ended up seeing it multiple times. We saw it a little bit in this episode, but we saw it last episode. That it seemed like it was Korra's chest that was being stepped on, and you kind of hear her chest cracking. So immediately my brain goes like, and especially there was a moment, it seemed like it was more like a stab and it wasn't someone's foot being stepped on, but maybe just because it went by so fast, I couldn't really tell, but it looked like it was Maddie who was the victim of it. So maybe it's something like that. Maybe what Korra is reacting when it comes to the stabbings is actually how Maddie died, kind of going back to it. Maybe he stepped on them, treated them like crap or something, was part of his process. Maybe he stepped on Korra, maybe he stepped on Maddie, but maybe that's what the stabbing's all about, because she has a traumatic experience of seeing Maddie die that way. The fact is that he stabbed her that 7 times or something like that. And maybe that's why JD's kind of being a dick about this whole situation, because ultimately for him, he feels guilty and he doesn't want to admit fault in all this situation, that whatever happened to Maddie and Korra back then, it's his own fault because he left them alone and stuff like that. Because it doesn't even seem, because even Korra herself said like they never actually did anything like heroin together. Even though he sells drugs, sure, that's why Mason was trying to get him and everything. But it's like, no, they did things other than that. So the whole things on our arm have to be related to that dude. So maybe that's why JD's kind of hush-hush about this, because he doesn't want to drag his family and the people he's connected to in on all this stuff, because to him it was like it was so long ago, and it's like he made a mistake then, and now why should he have to suffer for it? Or maybe JD is connected to that person and he did that specifically, leaving them for that person to find them, that it was part of their twisted game. Maybe JD's like pretty tight with this person, or maybe this person is kind of forcing JD to help them for whatever reason, and he's covering that person's tracks because he doesn't want to be implicated in whatever happened, so. And I kept wondering why, like every time, and I was actually surprised we kind of tap into it a little bit in this episode, is like why every so often Korra would kind of like her memory would shift and she'd be a little girl and the bus would drive by and she'd miss it. And it's like, what's the significance of that? Like Dr. Cheng, the lady that kind of was hypnotizing her, was kind of bringing it up, but you had Harry kind of being like, no, who cares about it? It doesn't matter. But it seems like it does matter, because that's around the area he found the body. There was a broken down school bus. So that kind of begs the question of maybe that's supposed to represent either the killer was on that school bus, maybe her and Maddie actually knew each other before then or something like that. Like, I'm trying to understand. Maybe psychologically, it well, it took a memory of hers, like her missing a school bus. And because that day, like whatever happened with Maddie, she was there and she saw that broken down school bus. And so her memory, like to kind of compensate, to kind of retrieve that memory without directly retrieving it. I know that's a little confusing, but it's like maybe it kind of projected itself in a different manner. Because there's a lot of connections, like your memories will kind of draw connections. It might not be 100% obvious, but there's something there. So it's like, oh, this school bus is here, making you remember this random memory of a school bus driving by to represent the fact that you saw a school bus, and that's why it triggers that particular memory, something like that. So I mean, it's very fascinating when you actually take time to really break it down, like memories and stuff. And that seems to be like the big focus of the show. It's like memories and stuff like that, diving deeper into like a person's psyche kind of and stuff like that, trying to, figure this all out, figuring out the why and, what pieces you're missing to the puzzle and everything like that. So overall, a very good episode. And I'm very interested to see where all this takes us, within the next episode and going forward, and whether anything I've said ends up being any validity to it, or whether it's just me grasping at straws. So I'm very curious to see what happens next. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.